Hello, and welcome to Boring Science to Sleep, a quiet place where science becomes slow, soft, and easy to drift through. Tonight, we're going to gently explore one of the oldest questions human beings have ever asked. Where does space stop? Not to solve every mystery, and not to reach a final answer, but simply to wander through the question together, slowly, calmly, and without needing to hurry anywhere. If you truly enjoy these peaceful journeys through science, you're warmly invited to like this video and subscribe, but only if it feels right for you. And if you're comfortable sharing, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It is always a quiet joy to imagine people from different corners of the world settling down beneath the same night sky, each preparing for a peaceful night's rest. Now dim the lights if you haven't already. Perhaps there is the gentle hum of a fan nearby, or the soft rhythm of rain against a window. Let your shoulders loosen, let your breathing become natural, and allow yourself to become comfortable. There is nothing you need to solve tonight. Nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to achieve. You are safe. You are warm. You can simply listen, and let every thought drift past like distant clouds. As we begin, imagine yourself standing beneath an impossibly clear night sky. Above you, countless stars scatter across the darkness. Some shine brightly, others are so faint they almost disappear into the velvet black between them. They seem peaceful, almost still, yet every tiny point of light has traveled an unimaginably long journey before reaching your eyes. Some of that light began its journey long before the first cities were built. Some left its distant home before the Earth looked anything like it does today. Some may have been traveling quietly across the universe for longer than our own species has existed. And yet, despite all those unimaginable distances, your mind naturally asks a surprisingly simple question. If you could keep traveling, past every planet, past every star, past every galaxy, would you eventually arrive somewhere? Would there be a final shoreline of existence? Would space simply stop? Or is that question itself asking something the universe was never designed to answer? There is no need to decide tonight. Instead, we'll simply follow the question wherever it gently leads us, allowing science to become less like a classroom and more like a quiet landscape you can wander through without ever feeling lost. So settle in, breathe slowly, let the stars remain exactly where they are, and together, we'll begin one of the calmest journeys imagination can offer. Imagine yourself standing beside an endless ocean, just before sunrise. The air is cool, the waves are gentle, and everything feels wonderfully quiet. Far away, where the sea seems to meet the sky, there is a thin line stretching from one side of the world to the other. It looks solid enough that you almost feel you could walk toward it if only there were a path across the water. Of course, you already know what would happen. The farther you traveled, the farther that distant line would quietly move away. The horizon was never truly a place waiting to be reached. It was simply the limit of what you could see. In many ways, our thoughts about the universe begin in exactly the same way. As children, and often as adults, we naturally imagine that every place must eventually come to an end. Every room has walls. Every forest eventually gives way to open fields. Every island has a shoreline. Every road either bends, branches, or finally stops. Our daily lives gently teach us that everything has boundaries. So when we lift our eyes toward the night sky, it feels almost impossible not to ask where the universe ends. If you kept traveling forever, surely there must eventually be something waiting for you. A wall, a cliff, a great invisible curtain, or perhaps simply nothing at all. It is an understandable question, It is also a question shaped by a lifetime spent living inside a world filled with familiar edges. The universe, however, has never promised to behave like the places we know best. One of the quiet surprises of modern science is that many of our deepest intuitions work beautifully on Earth, but become less reliable the farther we allow our imagination to travel. Distance begins to behave differently. Time begins to weave itself together with space. Even the idea of a straight line becomes something more flexible than we first imagined. Yet before we wander into any of those remarkable ideas, there is another small misunderstanding that deserves our attention. Many people unknowingly combine two different questions into one. The first asks where the universe began. The second asks where the universe ends. At first, those questions sound almost identical, but they are not. Imagine reading the first page of a very long book. The beginning of the story tells you when the journey starts. It does not tell you where the final page will be found. Likewise, when scientists describe the early universe, they are speaking about the beginning of a long unfolding history, not about discovering a physical edge somewhere far away in space. A beginning in time is not necessarily a border in space. Those are two entirely different ideas. Once we gently separate them, the question becomes a little quieter. Not easier, perhaps, but clearer. As the night grows deeper above you, imagine taking a slow walk beneath the stars. You never feel the earth announce where one step ends and another begins. The landscape changes gradually. Fields become forests. Forests become hills. Hills become mountains. Nature rarely draws sharp lines. Instead, it prefers gentle transitions. Perhaps the universe is more like that than we first expected. Perhaps the reason we have never found an edge is not because we have failed to look carefully enough, but because the universe was never arranged like a room with walls. Our minds often search for endings because endings make us feel oriented. If every place has a border, then every journey has a destination. But what if reality is more patient than that? What if some questions invite exploration instead of arrival? For thousands of years, people have imagined sailing farther than anyone had ever gone before, wondering whether they would eventually fall from the world or discover entirely new lands. Each generation slowly pushed its horizon farther away, only to discover that the world was larger, richer, and more surprising than expected. The universe has a way of offering the same quiet lesson again and again. Whenever we believe we have reached the final horizon, another one seems to appear beyond it, not because reality is hiding from us, but because understanding often grows one gentle step at a time. Tonight, there is no need to rush toward the answers. The question itself is already a peaceful place to rest. As you continue listening, you might simply notice how natural it feels to imagine an edge, and how quietly extraordinary it is that the universe may invite us to think in an entirely different way. Somewhere beyond the countless stars overhead, another idea is waiting, with the same quiet patience, carried not by distance alone, but by light itself, slowly crossing the darkness, one silent moment after another. Imagine that, somewhere beyond the hills, someone lights a single lantern. You cannot see it immediately. The light must first begin its quiet journey toward you, crossing the darkness with perfect patience. It asks for nothing. It does not hurry. It simply continues, moment after moment, until eventually, almost without announcing itself, it reaches your eyes. Now imagine thousands of lanterns, then millions, then more than anyone could ever hope to count. Every one of them sends its own tiny message across an unimaginably vast distance. When you look into the night sky, This is closer to what you are truly seeing, not the universe exactly as it is now, but countless messages that have been traveling for an extraordinarily long time. Every star is a little older than it appears. Every galaxy is a memory arriving. Even the moon, so familiar and comforting above us, is never seen exactly as it is in the present moment. Its light takes only a little over a second to reach Earth, so you are always seeing it as it was just a heartbeat ago. The sun is farther away. Its warm light spends several minutes crossing the space between the sun and our world before gently touching your face on a quiet morning. Beyond the sun are distant stars, whose light may travel for years before arriving. Beyond those stars are galaxies, whose light has wandered across the universe for millions, or even billions of years, before finally finding its way to your eyes tonight. Looking farther into space is quietly similar to opening older and older letters. Each one was written at a different moment. Each one has traveled its own remarkable path. Some letters are recent, some are unimaginably ancient. The farther away something is, the longer its light has been traveling. And because of that, distance slowly becomes another way of measuring history. This idea may seem unusual at first, but once it settles gently into your thoughts, it begins to feel surprisingly natural. Imagine standing in a peaceful valley at dusk. Across the valley, friends light campfires one after another. The nearest fire reaches your eyes almost immediately. The farthest one appears much later. You are not watching every fire in the same moment. You are watching different moments arrive at different times. The universe behaves in much the same quiet way. Every direction you look is also a journey into another chapter of cosmic history. This brings us to a phrase that scientists often use. They speak about something called the observable universe. Although the name sounds technical, the idea itself is wonderfully simple. The observable universe is not everything that exists. It is everything whose light has had enough time to reach us since the universe began its long unfolding story. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast forest on a misty morning. You can only see as far as the fog allows. The trees beyond the mist have not disappeared. They are simply hidden from view. The universe may be something like that. There may be countless galaxies far beyond what we can observe. There may be regions so distant that their light is still patiently traveling, never quite arriving within the lifetime of our civilization, or perhaps even within the lifetime of our universe as we know it. That does not mean those places are empty. It simply means their stories have not reached us. This is one of the most comforting ideas in modern cosmology. Our view is limited, but reality may not be. The edge of what we can observe is not necessarily the edge of existence. It is only the edge of the stories that have arrived so far. Sometimes people imagine the observable universe as though someone had built an enormous transparent sphere around us. It is helpful for a moment, but only if we remember that the sphere is imaginary. It is not floating through space. It has no glass walls. It casts no shadow. If another civilization lived in a galaxy unimaginably far from our own, they would have their own observable universe. From where they stood, light would have reached them from a different collection of distant places. Their invisible horizon would be centered on them, just as ours is centered on us. In that sense, every observer quietly carries a different window into the universe. No one occupies the special center. No one has the complete view. Each observer simply receives a different collection of ancient messages, arriving with perfect patience across the immense ocean of space. Rather than making the universe feel smaller, this thought somehow makes it feel even more generous. Reality does not gather itself around a single point of view. Instead, every place becomes its own peaceful viewpoint, with its own expanding circle of visible history. As astronomers build larger telescopes and more sensitive instruments, they do not uncover the entire universe. They simply learn to read fainter letters. They discover older whispers. They notice quieter echoes that have been waiting in the darkness all along. Every improvement in our ability to observe is less like tearing down a wall and more like hearing a distant voice that had always been speaking too softly to notice. There is something deeply calming about that. Knowledge does not arrive all at once. It arrives gently, one quiet beam of light after another, one patient discovery after another, one distant whisper after another. And perhaps that is how the universe has always preferred to introduce itself. As you continue resting beneath this imagined sky, you may notice that the question has already begun to change. Instead of wondering where space ends, another question slowly takes its place. How far can light actually travel before it reaches you? And what invisible paths must every tiny beam of light quietly follow as it crosses the immense darkness between distant galaxies and your waiting eyes? For a few peaceful moments, imagine yourself sitting beside a calm lake just after sunset. The water is perfectly still. Somewhere on the opposite shore, a single pebble slips gently into the lake. Tiny ripples begin spreading across the surface. They move quietly outward, one graceful circle after another, never rushing, never hesitating. You do not feel the splash itself. You only notice the ripples when they finally arrive where you are sitting. The event happened elsewhere. Some time passes. Then the message reaches you. Light behaves in a surprisingly similar way. Whenever a star shines, whenever a galaxy glows, whenever a distant cloud of glowing gas quietly releases its gentle light into the darkness, that light begins a journey. It does not appear everywhere all at once. Instead, it travels, patiently, faithfully, always carrying with it a tiny piece of history. Tonight, as you rest beneath an imagined sky, every point of light above you is still traveling. Some of those quiet travelers have been crossing the universe for an astonishing length of time. Others have only recently begun their journey. Each one arrives carrying a different story from a different moment. That is why astronomers often describe telescopes as time machines. Not because they move through time, not because they change history, but because they allow us to receive older and older messages. Imagine opening a collection of handwritten letters. The letter resting on top was written yesterday. The next one was written many years ago. Another was written by someone who lived long before you were born. Although you are reading them all tonight, each letter belongs to a different chapter of history. The universe quietly works in much the same way. The nearest stars tell relatively recent stories. The most distant galaxies tell stories so ancient that they began long before our own planet looked the way it does today. Every direction you look becomes a library of different moments waiting patiently to be read. Perhaps this is one of the gentlest ideas in all of astronomy. The night sky is not a photograph taken in a single instant. It is more like a tapestry woven from countless moments, each arriving at its own unhurried pace. Some threads are young, others are unimaginably old. Together, they create the beautiful picture you see above. There is another comforting thought hidden within this quiet journey. Light never becomes confused about where it came from. It carries the memory of its birthplace with remarkable faithfulness. If a star glowed softly for thousands of years, its light carries traces of that peaceful life. If a distant galaxy slowly turned through the darkness, the light leaving that galaxy quietly recorded those ancient moments before beginning its long voyage across the cosmos. By the time those tiny beams finally arrive here, They have crossed distances so immense that they almost seem impossible to imagine. Yet they never complain. They never become impatient. They simply continue moving through the great silence between galaxies. It is a strangely beautiful image, an endless procession of quiet travelers, each carrying a single message across the darkness. Sometimes people wonder whether we are seeing the universe as it truly is right now. The gentle answer is no. We are seeing the universe as its light has allowed us to see it. Everything we observe belongs, at least by a little, to the past. Even the room around you is not seen in the exact present moment, although the difference is so incredibly small that your senses cannot notice it. Light always needs a little time. Usually that time is unimaginably brief. Across the universe, however, those brief moments become years, then thousands of years, then millions, then billions. History slowly stretches across the darkness until looking farther into space naturally becomes looking farther into time. This idea may sound surprising at first, but after sitting quietly beside it for a while, it begins to feel almost peaceful. The universe does not hide its past. It gently shares it with anyone patient enough to receive the light. Imagine standing beneath a quiet snowfall. Each snowflake falls from a different place in the clouds. Some reach your hands first. Others drift more slowly through the still air before softly landing beside you. Although they arrive together, each has followed its own unique path. Light is much the same. Every tiny beam has traveled its own extraordinary journey before finally arriving at your eyes. Some journeys are short. Others have lasted for almost the entire history of the universe itself. Perhaps that is one reason the night sky feels so calming. Without realizing it, you are surrounded by ancient travelers. Every peaceful point of light has crossed an immense darkness simply to become visible for a fleeting moment. There is something wonderfully humbling about that thought. The universe has been quietly speaking for a very long time. We have only recently learned how to listen. Even our largest telescopes do not command the universe to reveal itself. They simply become better listeners. They collect faint whispers that have been drifting patiently through space for ages beyond ordinary imagination. With each new discovery, scientists do not force open another hidden door. Instead, they hear another distant voice joining a conversation that has always been taking place. The universe is remarkably patient. It does not rush to explain itself. It allows every answer to arrive at the same gentle pace as the light that carries it. And as beautiful as these ancient journeys are, they quietly raise another question. If light always needs time to travel, if every message arrives only after an extraordinary voyage, then perhaps there are places whose light has not reached us yet. Perhaps there are stories still traveling. Perhaps there are conversations that have not yet arrived. And perhaps there are invisible rules that quietly determine which stories can one day reach us, and which ones will forever remain beyond our horizon, not because a wall stands in the way, but because the universe itself has its own gentle way of deciding how far every message may wander. Imagine that you are standing beside a perfectly still pond at dawn. The surface is smooth enough to reflect the pale colors of the morning sky. Not a single breeze disturbs the water. Everything feels calm, balanced, and wonderfully quiet. Now imagine dropping one tiny pebble into the center. The pebble disappears beneath the surface without making much sound. Yet almost immediately, delicate circles begin spreading outward. Each ripple moves gently away from where the pebble entered the water. No ripple suddenly appears far away. No circle skips across the pond. Everything unfolds naturally, one peaceful wave following another. If you were standing close to the pebble, you would notice the ripples almost immediately. If you were standing much farther away, you would wait a little longer before they quietly reached your feet. The message always arrives. It simply needs time. In many ways, light behaves much like those gentle ripples. Whenever something happens somewhere in the universe, the news of that event cannot appear everywhere at once. It travels, patiently, steadily, always moving through the great quietness between one place and another. Modern physics has a beautiful way of imagining this invisible journey. Scientists often speak about something called a light cone. The name may sound unfamiliar, but the idea itself is surprisingly peaceful. Rather than picturing complicated diagrams, imagine an ever-growing circle spreading across a calm lake. With every passing moment, the circle becomes slightly larger. More distant places are gently reached by the ripple. More of the lake becomes connected to that single splash. Light quietly does something very similar. Every moment sends its own expanding message into the universe. The longer time passes, the farther that message can travel. Instead of imagining invisible lines and mathematical drawings, you can simply imagine countless circles of light, slowly expanding through an endless darkness, each one carrying a small piece of history. Every star creates its own expanding circles. Every galaxy does the same. Even you are quietly sending tiny messages into the universe. Every beam of light reflected from your face, every small warmth radiating into the room, every gentle movement becomes part of an ever-growing story that slowly travels outward. You are, in your own quiet way, participating in the great conversation of the cosmos. There is something deeply comforting about that thought. Nothing needs to hurry. Every message simply continues its journey. This gentle picture also helps us understand another important idea. Not every event can influence every other event. Imagine once more that peaceful pond. If two pebbles are dropped into opposite sides of the water at almost the same moment, there will be a period of time before their ripples finally meet. Until then, each ripple quietly travels through its own part of the lake. The same is true throughout the universe. Some places are close enough for light to travel between them. Others are simply too far apart for their stories to have met yet. This is not because something blocks the way. There is no invisible wall, no giant barrier floating through space. Instead, time itself has not yet allowed every conversation to take place. The universe is filled with journeys that are still unfolding. Some messages are already arriving. Some are still crossing unimaginable distances. Others have only just begun. If you could somehow pause the universe and watch all these quiet journeys at once, you might see countless rivers of light flowing in every direction, each carrying memories from one distant place to another. Some rivers would cross, others would never meet, not because they refused to, but because every journey has its own rhythm. This idea also explains something wonderfully surprising. Every observer in the universe lives inside a slightly different circle of experience. Imagine thousands of people standing across a wide valley on a peaceful evening. One by one, candles begin to glow. The people standing near the center see one collection of lights. Those standing farther away see another. No one is wrong. Each person simply witnesses the lights that have had enough time to reach them. The universe quietly behaves in much the same way. Every observer carries an invisible horizon, shaped by the light that has reached them. No one possesses the complete picture. No one stands at a privileged center where all stories arrive together. Instead, every place becomes its own peaceful window into reality. This is one reason the universe feels both immense and wonderfully humble. It reminds us that every viewpoint is partial. Every perspective is gently limited. and yet every observer still participates in the same magnificent cosmos. Perhaps this is not a limitation to fear. Perhaps it is simply the way reality remains beautifully shared. Imagine opening a window on a quiet spring morning. From one room you hear birds singing in the garden. From another room, you hear a distant stream. Neither window reveals the entire landscape. Yet each offers something genuine. Each reveals a small piece of the world exactly as it arrives. The universe offers us much the same kindness. It does not overwhelm us with everything all at once. Instead, it allows understanding to arrive patiently, one beam of light after another, one ancient whisper after another. As astronomers continue exploring deeper into the heavens, they are not searching for a physical wall surrounding existence. They are listening for older voices. They are waiting for quieter ripples. They are discovering conversations that began long before humanity ever looked upward. And with every discovery comes another quiet realization. The greatest limits in the universe are often not made of stone or steel. They are woven from time itself. Not barriers, not fences, simply the patient rhythm with which light carries every story across the endless sea of space. As this thought settles gently into your imagination, another peaceful question begins to emerge. If light quietly determines which stories can reach us, then what happens at the farthest limits of those journeys? What kind of horizon appears when the oldest light has traveled as far as it possibly can? There is a peaceful moment that many people have experienced, whether standing beside the sea, walking across an open plain, or gazing over rolling hills just after sunrise. You look toward the distance and notice the horizon. It appears steady, certain, almost solid. It seems to mark the place where the world finally comes to an end. Yet you already know its gentle secret. The horizon is never truly waiting for you. No matter how far you walk, it quietly walks with you. It is not part of the landscape. It is part of the relationship between the landscape and where you happen to be standing. The universe has something surprisingly similar. Scientists also use the word horizon, but they are not describing a cliff floating through space or an invisible shell surrounding everything that exists. Instead, they are describing a quiet limit to what can be known, a limit to what has had enough time to reach us. Imagine once again that enormous ocean stretching beneath a peaceful sky. Far beyond the place where the water seems to meet the heavens, ships continue sailing. Some are close enough that you can see their white sails glimmering in the sunlight. Others are so distant that only the tallest mast remains visible. Still farther away, every ship quietly disappears beyond your horizon. Did those ships suddenly vanish? Of course not. They simply traveled beyond what your eyes could comfortably follow. The universe offers us much the same experience. There are places whose light has already arrived. There are places whose light is arriving right now. And there are places so unimaginably distant that their light is still making its long, silent journey toward us. Perhaps one day it will arrive. Perhaps it never will. Not because the universe is hiding anything from us, simply because every message needs time. Earlier, we imagined light as patient travelers carrying ancient stories across the darkness. Now we begin to notice that every traveler has a limit to how far it can go within a given amount of time. Imagine inviting friends from every corner of a vast country to visit your home. Some live nearby and arrive before sunset. Others travel through the night. Those living much farther away may still be walking long after you have gone to sleep. Their journey is real. Their destination is real. They simply have not arrived yet. The observable horizon is very much like that. It marks the greatest distance from which light has been able to reach us during the long history of the universe. Beyond that quiet horizon, there may be countless stars, countless galaxies, perhaps even entire regions as rich and beautiful as the one we can observe. We simply have not received their greetings yet. This idea often surprises people. Many imagine that scientists have discovered the edge of the universe. In truth, what has been identified is something much gentler, not the edge of existence, only the edge of today's conversation. The universe may be speaking far beyond our horizon. Its oldest voices simply have not reached us. There is another beautiful way to imagine this. Picture yourself standing in the middle of an enormous forest on a misty morning. The fog allows you to see only a certain distance. Nearby trees appear sharp and clear. Those farther away become softer. Eventually, the forest simply fades into pale white mist. You would never conclude that the forest ends where your vision does. You naturally understand that the trees continue beyond what you can presently see. The universe quietly asks us to develop the same gentle patience. Our vision has limits. Reality may not. This is one of the reasons astronomers are so careful with their language. When they describe the observable universe, they are describing our current view, not the entire stage upon which the cosmic story unfolds. It is a wonderfully humble distinction. Science is not saying, "This is all that exists." It is saying, "This is what the light has shown us so far." That small difference changes everything. It transforms certainty into quiet curiosity. It reminds us that knowledge grows much like dawn. The morning light does not instantly illuminate every mountain, every valley, and every distant river. Instead, brightness slowly spreads across the landscape. Each passing moment reveals a little more, not because the world is growing larger, but because more of it is becoming visible. Perhaps our understanding of the universe is unfolding in much the same way. There is another horizon that deserves a gentle mention. Imagine shouting across a broad valley. Nearby friends hear your voice clearly. Those farther away hear only a faint echo. Eventually, the valley becomes so wide that your words can never reach the farthest hills. Not because your voice is weak, simply because distance has quietly become too great. The universe also contains limits like this. There are regions so distant that no conversation can ever take place between us. No signal could complete the journey. No greeting could be exchanged. These are not walls built from stone. They are quiet boundaries woven from time, distance, and the patient rhythm with which the universe allows information to travel. Perhaps boundary is not even the best word. Perhaps they are better understood as gentle pauses in an endless conversation. Places where two distant parts of the universe have not yet had the opportunity to speak to one another, or perhaps never will. There is something unexpectedly comforting in that thought. The universe does not separate its distant places through anger or intention. It simply unfolds according to its own calm rhythm. Every beam of light, every whisper of warmth, every ancient story, each one moves faithfully onward, never hurrying, never stopping before its journey is complete. As you rest beneath this imagined sky, you might notice that the idea of an edge has become quieter than it once was. Instead of picturing a great wall at the end of space, you may now imagine an endless landscape where every horizon gently moves with the observer, where every limit belongs not to existence itself, but to the quiet pace at which light carries stories across the cosmos. And with that gentle realization, another question slowly begins to appear. If there are no walls surrounding the universe, if every horizon is simply a limit of what can be seen, then what, exactly, is it that continues to grow between the galaxies themselves, quietly carrying every horizon farther and farther into the great darkness. Take a slow, comfortable breath. As you breathe in, notice how your chest rises almost effortlessly. As you breathe out, everything gently settles once again. Nothing has rushed. Nothing has been forced. There is simply a quiet rhythm of expansion and rest. Now imagine something much larger following its own peaceful rhythm. Not your breathing, not the tides of the ocean, not even the changing seasons. Imagine space itself. For a very long time, people pictured the universe as an enormous empty container. Stars floated inside it. Galaxies drifted through it. Everything moved around as though the universe were simply a giant room filled with countless shining objects. It is an easy picture to imagine because it resembles the world we know. Fish swim through water, birds fly through air, clouds drift across the sky. Surely galaxies must travel through space in much the same way. Modern astronomy, however, gently suggests something even stranger. The galaxies are certainly moving in many different ways, dancing around one another under the gentle pull of gravity. But on the very largest scales, something else is quietly happening. The space between them is slowly stretching. This may sound like a small difference. In truth, it changes almost everything. Imagine drawing tiny dots across the surface of a soft piece of fabric. Now imagine that the fabric itself begins to stretch ever so slowly. You do not see the dots pushing themselves across the cloth. Instead, the cloth grows larger, carrying every dot with it. From the viewpoint of each dot, all the others appear to drift farther away. Not because the dots have decided to travel, not because a giant wind is pushing them, simply because the fabric beneath them has quietly expanded. This gentle image comes much closer to how astronomers understand the universe. The galaxies are like those tiny dots. The fabric is space itself. As space slowly grows, the distances between many galaxies also grow. There is another image that many people find comforting. Imagine a loaf of bread resting quietly in an oven. Before it begins to bake, someone gently presses small raisins throughout the dough. As the bread slowly rises, every raisin notices something curious. The other raisins appear to move farther away. No raisin is especially important. No raisin sits at the true center of the rising loaf. From wherever a raisin happens to be, the others quietly drift away in every direction. If the raisins could think, each might wonder whether it occupied a special place. Yet every raisin would see exactly the same pattern. The bread itself is growing. This image is often used because it helps us let go of another deeply familiar idea. We naturally search for a center. Whenever we see something expanding in everyday life, there is usually a place where it began. A balloon inflates from somewhere. Ripples spread from a splash. Smoke rises from a fire. Our everyday experiences gently teach us to expect a central point. The universe does not seem to follow that expectation. As far as modern observations can tell us, there is no special center waiting to be discovered. Every distant galaxy sees the same general pattern. Its neighbors also appear to move away as space stretches. This is one of those rare moments when reality becomes both stranger and more peaceful than our intuition first imagined. There is no preferred seat in the universe, no hidden balcony offering the perfect view. Every observer participates in the same great unfolding. Once this idea begins to settle into your thoughts, another familiar question quietly appears. If the universe is expanding, what is it expanding into? It is an understandable question. After all, every expanding thing we know seems to grow into something larger. A tree grows into open air. A wave spreads across the sea. A child grows within the world. Surely the universe must also expand into something beyond itself. Surprisingly, modern physics suggests that this question may not describe reality in the way we expect. Imagine living inside a storybook. Every page contains forests, rivers, mountains, villages, and stars. Now imagine asking what lies beyond the edge of the story's sky. The question feels natural, yet the story was never written to include another sky beyond its own. Its world is complete within itself. Or imagine a dream. While dreaming, you may walk through cities, forests, or quiet beaches. You rarely stop to wonder what exists outside the dream's horizon. The dream is simply the place where the experience unfolds. The universe may be something like that. Space is not necessarily expanding into another larger room. Instead, space itself is quietly becoming larger. It is not a performance taking place upon a stage. It is the stage itself that slowly changes. Earlier, we imagined the universe as a great conversation carried by light. Now we discover that the distance each message must travel is also quietly changing. The road itself slowly grows longer. The travelers remain patient. Their journeys simply become more extraordinary. Perhaps this is why the universe feels so difficult to picture. Nearly everything in our daily lives happens inside something else. A bird flies through the sky. A fish swims through water. A boat crosses the sea. Our minds naturally expect the universe to fit the same pattern. Yet modern cosmology gently invites us toward a quieter possibility. Perhaps the universe is not inside anything larger. Perhaps space does not require another space beyond it. Perhaps asking what the universe expands into is a little like asking what lies farther north than the North Pole. The question itself may quietly step beyond the way reality is arranged. There is something unexpectedly calming about reaching that point. Not because every mystery has been solved, far from it. Rather, because we begin to recognize that the universe is under no obligation to resemble the ordinary places where our intuition first learned how the world works. Reality is free to be gentler than our expectations, broader than our imagination, and perhaps simpler in ways that are difficult to see at first. As you continue resting beneath this endless imagined sky, picture every galaxy slowly carried apart, not by rushing through an empty void, but by the quiet stretching of space itself, like tiny leaves resting upon a broad river, whose banks drift almost imperceptibly farther apart with every passing age. And as that gentle image settles into the stillness of your thoughts, another quiet question begins to rise. If space itself can slowly stretch and change, then perhaps space is not the rigid stage we once imagined. Perhaps it has a shape of its own, one that can bend, curve, and quietly guide everything that travels within it. Imagine waking very early, long before sunrise, while a loaf of bread rests inside a warm oven. Nothing dramatic seems to be happening. There are no loud sounds, no sudden movements. Yet, if you watched with extraordinary patience, you would notice something gentle unfolding. Little by little, the dough becomes larger. Tiny pockets of air quietly grow. The loaf slowly expands in every direction, almost too gently to notice from one moment to the next. Now imagine that small raisins have been scattered throughout the dough. Each raisin rests peacefully where it is. None of them decides to travel. None pushes the others away. And yet, as the bread slowly rises, every raisin notices the same curious thing. The distance between itself and the other raisins gradually becomes larger. If one raisin could somehow look around, it might think that every other raisin was drifting away. Another raisin, on the opposite side of the loaf, would notice exactly the same pattern. neither one would be mistaken. Neither one would occupy a special place. The dough itself is quietly growing. For many years, this simple image has helped scientists explain one of the most surprising discoveries about our universe. When astronomers carefully observed distant galaxies, they found something unexpected. On the largest scales, galaxies appear to be moving farther apart as time passes. At first, it seemed natural to imagine that they had all been thrown outward from a single point, like pieces of stone scattered after a great explosion. It is an understandable picture. After all, nearly every expanding object we encounter in everyday life begins with something bursting outward. But the universe invites us toward a gentler way of thinking. Rather than imagining galaxies racing through an enormous empty room, imagine the room itself becoming larger. The galaxies are carried along, much like the raisins resting quietly inside the rising bread. This difference may seem small, yet it changes the entire picture. The early universe was not an explosion taking place inside space. It was the beginning of space expanding. That may be one of the quietest and most beautiful ideas in modern cosmology. Space was not watching the event. Space was part of the event. As this thought settles gently into your imagination, another familiar question begins to soften. If everything is moving apart, where is the center? Our everyday experiences encourage us to search for one. When fireworks bloom across the night sky, there is a place where they began. When a pebble falls into a pond, there is a single splash from which every ripple spreads. When a child draws a circle, there is always a middle. So surely the universe must also have a center. And yet, every careful observation we have made suggests something wonderfully unexpected. No matter which galaxy you happen to call home, the overall picture would look remarkably similar. Every distant region would appear to be moving away. Imagine thousands of tiny villages spread across a vast plain. During the quiet hours before dawn, every village slowly becomes farther from every other one, because the land itself is gently stretching. No village could honestly claim to stand at the center of the stretching. Each would simply witness the same peaceful pattern unfolding around it. The universe appears to behave in much the same way. Wherever an observer may be, the great expansion looks broadly the same. This is why astronomers do not believe there is a special center hidden somewhere among the galaxies. Not because they have searched every corner of the cosmos, but because the evidence points toward a universe that expands everywhere at once. The idea may feel unfamiliar at first. It asks us to release one of our oldest habits of thought. We have learned to believe that every journey begins somewhere specific. Every road has a first step. Every river has a spring. Every story has an opening page. But the expanding universe is less like travelers leaving a city, and more like the pages of an enormous book, slowly growing larger, while every sentence remains peacefully in place. There is another comforting thought hidden inside this picture. If there is no special center, then perhaps there is no special direction either. No sign quietly pointing toward the edge. No arrow saying that one side of the universe is somehow closer to its ending than another. Instead, every direction becomes equally vast. Every horizon becomes equally mysterious. Earlier in our journey, we wondered whether the universe might possess a distant shoreline, waiting patiently beyond the farthest galaxies. But now that image begins to change. A shoreline belongs to an ocean with a definite border. A wall belongs to a room. A fence belongs to a field. If the universe expands everywhere, without a privileged center, perhaps searching for an outer edge is gently asking the wrong kind of question. Perhaps the universe is not a landscape surrounded by emptiness. Perhaps it is the landscape itself. This quiet realization has another consequence. When people imagine the beginning of the universe, they sometimes picture a brilliant flash occurring at one particular location, while empty space stretches endlessly around it. Modern cosmology offers a much calmer image. The beginning happened everywhere. Every region of today's universe can trace its own history back through that early expansion. There was no distant place where the universe began, while another place waited outside, untouched. Instead, every part of the cosmos shares in that ancient unfolding. It is a remarkably inclusive picture. No galaxy arrived late. No corner of space was left behind. Every region participated in the same great beginning. As strange as this idea may first seem, it carries a quiet elegance. The universe does not ask us to search for a forgotten center. It simply invites us to notice the gentle relationships between places, the slowly growing distances, and the patient unfolding of cosmic history. Perhaps that is why the question that opened our journey has already become softer than before. Where does space end? If there was never a central point from which everything burst outward, if every place shares equally in the quiet expansion, then perhaps the universe is asking us to think less about beginnings and endings, and more about the shape of the vast stage upon which everything exists. And once we begin wondering about the shape of space itself, another gentle possibility quietly appears. What if space is not an invisible emptiness at all, but something with its own graceful structure, capable of bending, stretching, and guiding every star, every galaxy, and every beam of ancient light across the silent ages? Imagine spreading a large woven blanket across a quiet meadow. At first it lies perfectly smooth beneath the morning sky. A few leaves rest upon its surface. They barely move, waiting patiently in the still air. Now imagine placing a smooth, heavy stone in the middle of the blanket. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no sudden noise, no sharp movement. The blanket simply settles. Almost imperceptibly, it curves beneath the weight of the stone. The leaves have not changed. The blanket has. If one of the leaves begins to drift gently across the surface, its path is no longer perfectly straight. Not because the leaf has chosen a different direction, not because an invisible hand has reached out to guide it. The path changes because the landscape beneath it has quietly changed. For generations, people imagined gravity as an invisible force reaching across empty space, gently pulling every object toward every other. That picture works remarkably well for many everyday experiences. But as scientists looked more deeply into the universe, another, quieter picture began to emerge. Perhaps gravity is not simply a pull. Perhaps it is the shape of reality itself. This idea was one of the most beautiful gifts modern physics has offered us. Long before we learn its scientific name, we can simply imagine the universe as a landscape rather than an empty container. Not a rigid stage upon which everything performs, but a living landscape whose gentle curves influence every journey. Picture yourself walking through peaceful countryside. Across a perfectly flat field, you naturally walk in a straight line. Across rolling hills, your path slowly changes. Not because someone directs your footsteps, the land itself quietly guides where walking feels easiest. Light behaves in a surprisingly similar way. Even light, which races across the universe with extraordinary faithfulness, quietly follows the shape of the cosmic landscape. If space is gently curved, then light also follows those gentle curves. It is not being pulled like a rope. It is simply following the natural pathways woven into the universe itself. Only after we become comfortable with this peaceful image do scientists introduce its formal name. They call this picture general relativity. Although the name sounds wonderfully grand, the central idea can remain beautifully simple. Matter quietly shapes the geometry of space and time. That geometry gently guides the motion of matter and light. It is less like an invisible force pulling everything together. It is more like travelers naturally following the contours of an ancient valley. There is another quiet surprise hidden inside this picture. Earlier in our journey, we spoke about space as though it were one thing, and time as though it were another. Our everyday lives encourage us to think that way. Distance belongs to space. Moments belong to time. One tells us where we are. The other tells us when we are. Yet the universe appears to treat them as close companions. Instead of two completely separate ideas, they become parts of one gently woven fabric. Scientists call this shared landscape spacetime. You do not need to imagine complicated diagrams. Simply picture an enormous woven tapestry. Every thread supports the others. You cannot gently pull one thread without causing the surrounding threads to shift ever so slightly. Space and time quietly belong together in much the same way. When the universe changes, both participate in the change. When galaxies move, they move through this shared landscape. When light travels, it follows its quiet pathways. When gravity appears, it is the landscape itself, gently bending beneath the presence of matter and energy. Perhaps this sounds stranger than anything we have imagined so far, and yet there is something wonderfully peaceful about it. The universe is not held together by countless invisible strings pulling every object in every direction. Instead, everything quietly follows the shape of the same vast cosmic landscape. Imagine floating down a slow river beneath a moonlit sky. The water carries you gently around bends you never planned. You are not steering every movement. The river quietly shapes the journey. In much the same way, stars orbit galaxies, planets circle stars, and light crosses the universe by following the gentle currents woven into space-time itself. This also helps us return to the question that has accompanied us since the beginning of our journey. Where does space stop? Once we begin thinking of space as a flexible landscape rather than an empty box, the question itself becomes softer. A landscape does not require a wall simply because it possesses hills. A valley does not suddenly end because it curves. A winding river does not need a cliff to prove that it exists. Shape and boundary are not the same thing. Something can possess a beautiful form without requiring an outer edge. This small distinction quietly prepares us for one of the most surprising ideas in all of cosmology. Space may have a shape. It may even possess an overall geometry that stretches far beyond anything we can directly observe. Yet none of that automatically requires a final border where everything suddenly comes to an end. A curved landscape is still a landscape. Its gentle bends do not demand a wall beyond the last hill. As astronomers study the oldest light in the universe, the motions of distant galaxies, and the graceful paths followed by light itself, they continue gathering clues about this enormous cosmic landscape. Each observation is like feeling a tiny piece of an immense tapestry with careful fingertips. No one can yet hold the entire fabric in their hands. But little by little, its quiet pattern begins to reveal itself. And perhaps that is one of the loveliest parts of science. Not the certainty of having every answer, but the patience to notice one gentle curve after another, one quiet thread after another, one small glimpse of a landscape so vast that it continues unfolding long after our imagination grows still. As you rest beneath this endless sky, you might imagine yourself walking across that peaceful landscape without ever encountering walls or fences, only gentle hills stretching into the distance, each one inviting another, until the very idea of an edge begins to fade into something softer. And somewhere beyond those distant hills, another quiet possibility waits, with remarkable patience. What if the universe could be complete without ever needing an edge at all? Imagine setting out on a long walk across a beautiful landscape. The morning air is cool, the sky is clear, birds greet the day with quiet songs, and every step carries you gently forward. You do not know exactly where the path will lead, but that hardly matters. The joy is in the walking itself. Hours pass, then days, perhaps even months. You continue moving in the same steady direction, always trusting the path beneath your feet. At first, it seems impossible that such a journey could ever bring you back to where you began. Surely, if you never turn around, you must eventually reach an ending. A fence, a cliff, the edge of the world. For much of human history, many people believed exactly that. The world seemed flat enough beneath their feet. The horizon appeared to mark a final boundary. It felt reasonable to imagine that one day a determined traveler might simply arrive at the end. But the Earth quietly revealed a different story. If you could continue walking in the same direction for long enough, crossing mountains, deserts, forests, and oceans, you would not discover a great cliff overlooking emptiness. Instead, one quiet morning, you might find yourself returning to the place where your journey first began. Not because you turned around, not because the path folded beneath your feet, but because the world itself possesses a gentle shape. It is complete, it is finite, and yet it has no edge where a traveler suddenly runs out of Earth. This simple idea became one of the most helpful ways to imagine something much larger. Perhaps the universe could possess a similar kind of completeness. Not exactly like the Earth, of course. The universe is not a giant planet, nor does it curve through space in quite the same way. But the Earth offers us a peaceful reminder that boundaries are not always necessary. Something can have a definite size without needing a final wall. This distinction feels subtle at first. Our everyday experiences gently encourage us to connect size with borders. A garden has a fence. A room has walls. A lake has a shoreline. Every familiar place eventually gives way to something else. Yet nature quietly offers many exceptions. The surface of the Earth is one. A circle drawn on paper is another. You can move around its edge forever, without discovering a corner. Its journey has no beginning or ending point. It is complete from every direction. Perhaps the universe invites us to think in a similar way. Scientists have long explored the possibility that the universe might be finite, meaning it contains a limited amount of space, while still remaining completely without an edge. At first, this sounds almost impossible. How can something have a size, but no border? The answer begins to appear only when we gently separate two ideas that often become tangled together. The first idea asks how much space there is. The second asks whether space must eventually stop. Those are not quite the same question. Imagine reading a beautiful poem written in a perfect circle. You begin reading wherever you like. The words continue flowing naturally. Eventually, without crossing any boundary, you arrive back at the place where you started. The poem is complete. It has a length. Yet no final page suddenly interrupts its quiet rhythm. Or imagine a melody played over and over, with no harsh ending, each note flowing naturally into the next, until you can no longer remember where the music first began. Some journeys feel less like straight roads, and more like gentle circles. Perhaps space itself could be something like that. This possibility becomes even easier to imagine if we let go of another familiar habit. We often picture the universe as though someone were looking at it from the outside. as though we could step far enough away to admire its complete shape. But earlier in our journey, we discovered something important. Modern cosmology does not require an outside. The universe is not necessarily sitting inside a larger, empty room. If there is no outside viewpoint waiting for us, then searching for an outer border becomes a very different kind of question. It is a little like asking where the surface of the Earth ends while refusing to leave the surface itself. The question quietly changes once we understand the nature of the journey. Astronomers continue studying the oldest light in the cosmos, the motions of galaxies, and the gentle geometry of space-time itself. So far, their observations suggest something remarkable. On the largest scales we can measure, the universe appears extraordinarily close to flat. That does not necessarily mean it truly extends forever, nor does it prove that it is finite. It simply tells us that if the universe possesses an overall curvature, it is so gentle that our finest observations have not yet revealed it with certainty. Imagine standing in a vast desert. The land stretches smoothly toward every horizon. It feels perfectly flat. Yet you know that the earth beneath you is quietly curved. Its enormous size hides that gentle curvature from everyday experience. The universe may be offering us a similar lesson. Its true shape, whatever it may ultimately be, could be so immense that our observable region reveals only a tiny portion of the whole. This quiet uncertainty is not a weakness of science. It is one of its greatest strengths. Science does not pretend to know more than the evidence allows. Instead, it patiently says, "This is what we can see." Beyond that, many beautiful possibilities remain. Some suggest an endless universe. Others suggest a finite universe without boundaries. At present, nature has not yet whispered which picture is correct, and perhaps there is something wonderfully peaceful about that. Not every mystery demands immediate resolution. Some questions become richer simply by being carried gently through time. As your imagination continues its slow walk across this endless landscape, you may notice that the fear of reaching a final cliff has quietly faded. Instead, another possibility begins to feel strangely natural. A universe may be whole without being enclosed, complete without being surrounded, finite without ever asking you to stop walking. And if such a universe truly exists, another beautiful question begins to appear beyond the next quiet horizon. Could space do something even more surprising than simply curve? Could it somehow fold gently back upon itself, allowing a traveler who wanders far enough to return home by following a path that never once reaches an edge? Imagine walking through a long, peaceful hallway. The floor is smooth beneath your feet. Soft light spills through the windows, and every step echoes gently in the stillness. You continue walking at an easy pace. Nothing changes very much. The hallway simply stretches onward, calm and inviting. Minutes pass, perhaps hours. You begin to wonder whether the hallway will ever end. Will there eventually be a door, a wall, a final window looking out into something beyond? Then, almost without realizing it, something curious happens. Far ahead, someone is walking toward you. As the distance slowly closes, you recognize something unexpectedly familiar. The person approaching is you. Not another traveler, not a reflection. Somehow, by continuing in the same direction without ever turning around, you have quietly returned to where your journey first began. It sounds like something from a dream. And yet, ideas somewhat like this have been explored by mathematicians and cosmologists for many years. Not because anyone believes the universe is a magical hallway, of course, but because the universe may possess ways of connecting space that are far less obvious than our everyday experience suggests. Earlier in our journey, we imagined that space might be curved without possessing an edge. Now we take one gentle step further. Perhaps the question is not only about the shape of space, perhaps it is also about how space connects to itself. At first, these ideas may sound almost identical, but they quietly describe different things. Imagine holding a sheet of paper. You can gently bend it without changing which edges touch one another, or you can carefully bring two opposite edges together, joining them into a loop. The paper now connects differently, even though it is still made from the same material. The overall shape and the deeper pattern of connection are not always the same. The universe may quietly possess this kind of hidden complexity. Scientists have a formal name for these deeper patterns of connection. They call this field of study topology. The word may sound unfamiliar, but the underlying idea is remarkably gentle. Instead of asking what space looks like, topology asks how space is connected. Those two questions are close friends, but they are not quite the same. To imagine this more comfortably, picture yourself wandering through a peaceful garden at dusk. Tall hedges surround winding paths. Every turn reveals another quiet corner, another flower bed, another stone bench. You continue exploring, always choosing the path that leads forward. Eventually, after many gentle turns, you discover that you have returned to the very fountain where your walk first began. The garden never forced you to stop. It never placed a wall in front of you. Instead, its pathways quietly connected back upon themselves. Your journey formed a graceful loop. Some cosmological models suggest that space itself might possess this kind of hidden connection, not because someone folded the universe like a piece of paper, but because its deepest structure may naturally allow distant regions to meet in ways that are difficult for our everyday intuition to imagine. One mathematical model, often discussed by physicists, describes a universe where traveling far enough in one direction could eventually bring you back to your starting point. The formal name for one version of this idea is a three-dimensional torus. Fortunately, you do not need to remember that name. The image is far more important than the terminology. Simply imagine an endless journey that quietly becomes a circle without ever asking you to turn around. The idea may remind some people of old video games, where a character disappeared from one side of the screen and gently reappeared on the other. That image captures a small part of the idea, but the universe, if it behaved this way, would be far more subtle, elegant, and vast than any simple game could represent. A quieter image may be more comforting. Imagine standing inside a magnificent library filled with countless shelves. The books seem endless. The corridors stretch far into the distance. Yet unknown to every visitor, the architecture has been designed so perfectly that every hallway eventually returns to another familiar room. No one notices at first. The library simply feels immeasurably large. Only after an extraordinarily long journey would its hidden patterns slowly reveal itself. If the universe possessed such a quiet structure, how could we possibly discover it? Fortunately, astronomers do not need to travel across the entire cosmos. Instead, they allow light to become their guide. Earlier, we imagined every beam of light as a patient traveler carrying ancient stories across unimaginable distances. If space quietly wraps around itself, then some of those travelers might arrive more than once. Very distant regions of the sky could contain subtle repeating patterns, almost like hearing a familiar melody drifting from two different valleys. Scientists have carefully searched for these quiet repetitions. They have examined the oldest lights still filling the universe, looking for gentle clues that distant regions might actually be different views of the same place. So far, No convincing evidence has appeared. That does not prove such a universe is impossible. It simply tells us that if space does wrap around itself, the pattern is either far larger than the portion we can currently observe, or perhaps nature has chosen a different design altogether. There is something deeply satisfying about this approach. Science does not fall in love with beautiful ideas simply because they are beautiful. It patiently asks the universe for evidence. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes it is no. Sometimes the answer is simply not yet. That quiet patience may be one of science's most comforting qualities. It allows mystery to remain without becoming confusion. As you continue resting beneath this imagined sky, perhaps you can picture yourself walking peacefully through an endless landscape where every path remains open, every horizon stays gentle, and every journey carries the faint possibility that home may be waiting far ahead, disguised as somewhere entirely new. And if space truly hides such subtle patterns within its immense quietness, then perhaps the oldest light in the universe has already been carrying those clues across billions of years, patiently waiting for us to notice the delicate fingerprints it has left upon the sky. Imagine arriving at a quiet campsite just before dawn. The fire that once warmed the night has almost disappeared. The bright flames are gone. The crackling has faded into silence. Only a soft orange glow remains beneath the ashes, gentle enough that you almost wonder whether it is still there at all. The warmth is faint. The light is delicate. Yet it quietly tells you something important. The fire was here. Long before you arrived, it burned brightly. Now all that remains is its gentle afterglow. The universe carries something remarkably similar. If we look deeply enough into the sky, beyond nearby stars, beyond distant galaxies, and farther than almost anything else we can observe, we eventually encounter a very faint glow that surrounds us in every direction. It is not bright enough for human eyes to notice. It does not shimmer like the stars. It does not gather into graceful spiral galaxies. Instead, it fills the entire sky with an almost unimaginably gentle whisper of light. Scientists gave this ancient glow a rather formal name. They call it the cosmic microwave background. The name sounds technical. The reality is wonderfully simple. You can think of it as the oldest light we have ever been able to observe. It is the quiet afterglow of a universe that was once astonishingly young. Earlier in our journey, we imagined every beam of light as a patient traveler carrying a story from the past. This ancient glow carries perhaps the oldest story that light can still tell. It has been traveling toward us for nearly the entire history of the universe. Long before there were galaxies like our own, long before planets circled familiar stars, long before oceans formed on Earth, this light had already begun its endless journey. There is something deeply calming about imagining that. While mountains slowly rose and wore away, while forests appeared and disappeared, while generations of people looked upward and wondered about the stars, this ancient light continued traveling through the quiet darkness without ever becoming tired. Patiently, faithfully, almost silently. Imagine opening an old family photograph that has been carefully protected for countless generations. Its colors have softened with age. Its edges are worn. Some tiny details have faded. Yet it still carries the unmistakable memory of an earlier time. The cosmic microwave background is something like that. It is a photograph, not taken by a camera, but written into light itself. It preserves a quiet portrait of the universe when it was still extraordinarily young, not its very first moments, not the beginning itself, but an early chapter, long before the stars filled the heavens with their familiar light. When astronomers study this ancient glow, they are not simply admiring its beauty. They are reading one of the oldest surviving pages in the history of the cosmos. At first glance, the glow appears remarkably smooth, almost perfectly even. It wraps gently around the entire sky like a soft blanket of light. That peaceful uniformity tells us something important. The young universe was surprisingly balanced, remarkably calm. Yet if scientists examine that ancient light with extraordinary care, they discover something even more fascinating. Hidden within that quiet glow are tiny variations, so small that they are almost beyond imagination. Some regions are ever so slightly warmer, others are ever so slightly cooler. The differences are incredibly gentle, but they matter. Imagine standing in a meadow before sunrise. From a distance, the morning mist looks perfectly smooth. Only when sunlight slowly begins to spread across the fields do you notice tiny folds, delicate currents, and almost invisible patterns drifting through the air. The ancient light of the universe behaves in much the same way. Its overall appearance is calm. Its smallest details quietly reveal a richer story. Those tiny patterns would eventually become everything we see today. Over immense stretches of time, the slightly denser regions gently gathered more matter. Stars slowly formed. Galaxies appeared. Clusters of galaxies emerged. The magnificent cosmic web that fills the observable universe today began as barely noticeable ripples within this ancient sea of light. There is another reason astronomers listen so carefully to this oldest whisper. Earlier, we imagined the possibility that space might quietly wrap around itself. If that were true, the oldest light might carry subtle clues. Imagine standing in a valley, surrounded by distant mountains. You call out softly. A few moments later, faint echoes return. Now imagine hearing the same gentle echo arriving from two different directions. You might begin to wonder whether the landscape itself possesses a hidden shape that allows sound to travel in unexpected ways. Astronomers search for something similar in the oldest light. If space folds back upon itself, then light traveling along different paths might allow us to see repeating patterns across distant parts of the sky. It would be as though the universe had quietly left matching fingerprints upon its oldest photograph. For many years, scientists have searched patiently for these delicate clues. Remarkable space observatories have measured this ancient glow with extraordinary precision, allowing us to examine details that earlier generations could scarcely imagine. So far, no repeating pattern has provided convincing evidence that the observable universe wraps around itself in a way we can detect. That result is quietly meaningful. It does not tell us that such a possibility is impossible. It simply tells us that if the universe possesses such hidden connections, they extend beyond what this ancient light has yet revealed. There is something deeply satisfying about that answer. The universe has spoken, not loudly, not completely, but honestly. It has shared what it can. Beyond that, it remains peacefully silent. The oldest light has offered us remarkable gifts. It tells us that the universe is extraordinarily uniform across immense distances. It suggests that space appears very close to flat on the scales we can measure. It reveals the tiny seeds from which galaxies would eventually grow. And it gently reminds us that every answer in science begins with careful listening. Perhaps that is why this ancient glow feels so beautiful. It is not merely old, it is patient. For nearly the entire history of the cosmos, it has quietly crossed the darkness, waiting for curious minds to build instruments delicate enough to hear its whisper. As you rest beneath this imagined sky, you may picture that ancient light still flowing gently around our galaxy, around our sun, around our world, and around you. carrying a memory from a universe so young that stars had not yet filled the heavens. And somewhere within those quiet whispers lies another invitation. If the oldest light tells us that the universe appears astonishingly smooth and almost perfectly flat, then perhaps we should ask how such remarkable calmness ever came to be in the first place. Imagine waking before the first light of morning. The world is wonderfully still. Outside the window, the fields are wrapped in pale mist. Inside a quiet kitchen, a bowl of bread dough rests beneath a soft cloth. Nothing seems to be happening. No loud sounds, no dramatic movement. And yet, if you were patient enough to watch every passing moment, you would notice a quiet transformation. The dough slowly rises, almost too slowly to see. It does not leap upward. It does not burst into life. Instead, it gently becomes larger, little by little, carrying every tiny bubble within it farther apart. Hours later, the dough has become something entirely different. Not because each bubble traveled through the dough on its own, but because the dough itself quietly expanded around them. Long ago, as astronomers tried to understand the remarkable smoothness of the universe, they found themselves facing a gentle mystery. Earlier, we listened to the oldest light still filling the cosmos. That ancient glow appeared astonishingly even. Regions separated by unimaginable distances looked surprisingly alike. They shared almost the same quiet warmth, almost the same peaceful balance. At first, this seemed difficult to explain. Imagine two children standing on opposite sides of an enormous mountain range. They have never met, they have never spoken. No message has ever traveled between them. Yet somehow, they begin singing exactly the same song at exactly the same moment. You would naturally wonder how such harmony became possible. The early universe appeared to present a similar question. Some regions are so widely separated that, according to the ordinary passage of time, they should never have had the opportunity to exchange information before that ancient light began its journey. And yet they look remarkably similar. How could distant parts of the young universe have become so beautifully balanced? To help answer this quiet puzzle, scientists developed an idea that is both bold and surprisingly elegant. They suggested that, in the universe's earliest moments, space experienced an incredibly brief period of extraordinarily rapid expansion. The formal name for this idea is cosmic inflation. Although the name may sound dramatic, it helps to return to our quiet bowl of rising bread. Imagine that, for just the briefest moment, the dough expanded far more quickly than usual. Not forever, not even for very long. Just long enough to transform a tiny, closely connected region into something unimaginably larger. After that brief growth, the expansion settled into the calmer rhythm that continues today. The image is not perfect, but it gently captures the spirit of the idea. Before that rapid growth, everything we can observe today may once have occupied a region small enough to share information naturally. It was close together, balanced together, connected together. Then, during that extraordinary early expansion, those neighboring regions were quietly carried far apart. What appears today as distant parts of the observable universe may once have been close companions. Suddenly, the remarkable uniformity of the ancient light becomes easier to understand. The distant regions were not strangers. Long ago, they were neighbors. As comforting as this picture is, it also leaves room for something wonderfully delicate. Imagine standing beside a perfectly still pond. Its surface appears almost flawless. Then a gentle breeze passes across the water. Tiny ripples begin to appear. Not great waves, not violent splashes, only the smallest trembling patterns dancing across the surface. At first, they seem almost unimportant. But over time, those tiny ripples spread farther and farther. The early universe may have carried similarly gentle imperfections. Not flaws, not mistakes, simply tiny variations woven into its quiet beginning. During cosmic inflation, those incredibly small differences were stretched across enormous distances, like tiny brushstrokes on a canvas that slowly becomes larger. They remained almost invisible at first, but as billions of years passed, gravity gently amplified them. Regions containing just a little more matter slowly gathered more. Clouds formed, stars ignited, galaxies assembled, clusters appeared. The immense cosmic web we will soon explore may have begun as nothing more than almost imperceptible ripples in the universe's earliest moments. There is something deeply beautiful about that thought. The largest structures in existence may owe their origins to differences so small that no human eye could ever have noticed them. A tiny variation, patiently nurtured by time, growing into galaxies. Imagine a field after the first snowfall. From a distance, everything appears perfectly smooth. Only when the morning sun rises do you notice gentle undulations beneath the blanket of white. Small hills, soft valleys, subtle contours. The landscape was never perfectly flat. Its quiet details simply waited for the light to reveal them. The early universe may have been much the same, beautifully smooth, wonderfully balanced, yet carrying delicate patterns that would quietly shape everything still to come. Cosmic inflation also offers another gentle gift. It helps explain why the observable universe appears so remarkably close to flat. Imagine standing inside an enormous orchard. If the orchard extends far beyond anything you can see, the small area around you appears almost perfectly level. The larger the landscape becomes, the flatter your local view seems. Something similar may have happened to the universe. That extraordinary early expansion could have stretched any overall curvature so gently that our observable region now appears almost perfectly flat, much as a traveler standing on Earth rarely notices its immense curvature beneath their feet. Of course, like many beautiful scientific ideas, cosmic inflation is not accepted simply because it sounds elegant. Scientists continue searching for evidence. They compare careful observations of the oldest light with detailed predictions. They ask whether the quiet fingerprints left across the sky match what inflation would naturally produce. So far, the evidence has been remarkably encouraging. Many observations fit this picture with surprising grace. Even so, science remains patient. There are still questions waiting for answers. Exactly what caused inflation? Why did it begin? Why did it end? Those mysteries remain gently open, and perhaps that is fitting. Every answer the universe offers seems to carry another quiet question within it. As you continue resting beneath this endless sky, imagine those tiny ripples from the earliest moments of the cosmos, slowly growing across billions of years, becoming galaxies, clusters, and immense rivers of stars, until the universe itself begins to resemble a delicate web woven across the darkness. And somewhere within that vast tapestry, another quiet story is waiting to unfold, one that reveals how countless galaxies came together to create the largest patterns we have ever discovered. Imagine walking through a meadow just before sunrise. The air is cool enough that every breath feels fresh. Tiny beads of dew rest upon the grass, quietly catching the first pale hints of morning light. At first glance, each droplet appears completely alone, sparkling softly in its own little corner of the field. But as the sky slowly grows brighter, something almost magical begins to reveal itself. Between the droplets, delicate strands of spider silk gradually become visible. What first appeared to be countless separate points of light are, in fact, connected by threads so fine that darkness had hidden them only moments before. The more carefully you look, the more the quiet pattern emerges. Individual droplets become part of something much larger. The universe has surprised astronomers in much the same way. For centuries, people imagined galaxies scattered across space, rather like grains of sand sprinkled across an endless beach. Beautiful, numerous, but largely independent of one another. As telescopes became more powerful and maps of the universe grew ever more detailed, another picture slowly appeared. The galaxies were not scattered randomly. They formed graceful patterns stretching across unimaginable distances. Long bridges of galaxies connected enormous gatherings of stars. Between those bridges lay vast open regions where very few galaxies could be found. The universe, viewed on its largest scales, began to resemble an immense web. Scientists call this remarkable pattern the cosmic web. The name sounds wonderfully grand, but the image itself is surprisingly gentle. Imagine the delicate silk of a spider's web after an early morning rain. Tiny droplets gather where the threads meet. Some strands are thicker than others. Some intersections carry many shining drops. Wide spaces remain between them. Now imagine replacing every tiny droplet with an entire galaxy. Replace every thread with a graceful river of galaxies stretching through the darkness. Scale the entire picture until it becomes larger than anything human imagination can comfortably hold. The result is astonishingly close to what astronomers observe. These long bridges are often called filaments. You can simply think of them as the quiet roads of the universe. Along these immense pathways, galaxies gather together in graceful streams, connecting one enormous region to another. Where several of these great rivers meet, galaxies become even more numerous. These busy intersections are known as galaxy clusters. If the filaments are gentle country roads, then the clusters are peaceful villages, where many paths quietly come together. Some clusters contain hundreds of galaxies. Others contain thousands. Each galaxy carries billions of stars. Each star may possess its own family of planets, and all of them drift together through the great stillness of space with extraordinary patience. Then there are the vast open regions between these cosmic rivers. These enormous spaces are known as voids. The word void naturally invites the imagination to picture complete emptiness, a great blankness, a place where the universe has somehow come to an end. But that is not what astronomers mean. A cosmic void is quiet. It is spacious, yet it is not truly empty. Imagine walking through an immense valley covered by morning mist. Most of the trees grow along the hillsides where streams provide water. The center of the valley appears almost empty by comparison. Yet if you continue walking, you still find scattered wildflowers, gentle grasses, quiet birds, and the occasional solitary tree standing beneath the open sky. The valley is not nothing. It is simply less crowded. Cosmic voids are much the same. They contain far fewer galaxies than the magnificent filaments surrounding them. They also contain faint clouds of gas and the invisible matter whose gentle gravity quietly helps shape the universe. Even the loneliest regions still belong to the same great cosmic landscape. This is an important thought to carry with us. The largest empty spaces in the observable universe are not its edges. They are simply places where matter gathered less densely during the universe's long history. They are pauses within the music. Not the end of the song. Earlier in our journey, we followed tiny ripples preserved within the oldest light of the universe. Those almost invisible variations seem so small that they hardly appeared capable of changing anything. And yet, over billions of years, gravity patiently went to work. Regions containing just a little more matter gently attracted a little more still. Little by little, those tiny differences became larger. Like rainwater slowly finding its way downhill, matter flowed almost imperceptibly toward regions where gravity was ever so slightly stronger. There was no hurry, no sudden rush, only endless patience. Over immense stretches of time, graceful rivers of matter slowly emerged. Those rivers became the filaments, the crossings became clusters, the quieter spaces between them became the cosmic voids. There is something deeply comforting about this picture. The largest structures in the universe were not built through violence alone. They also grew through extraordinary patience. Billions of years of gentle gathering. Billions of years of quiet change. Imagine standing high upon a mountain, overlooking a great network of rivers, winding across a broad landscape. From above, every stream appears connected. Every valley belongs to the same living system. No river exists entirely by itself. The cosmic web offers a similar perspective. Every galaxy belongs to a much larger pattern, even if that pattern is far too vast for any single observer to see all at once. Our own galaxy is part of this magnificent web. The stars above you tonight belong to one tiny corner of an immense structure stretching across the observable universe. It is humbling to realize that we are not isolated points floating through an empty darkness. We are threads within a tapestry, droplets upon a web, leaves upon branches of an unimaginably ancient tree. And perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons hidden inside the cosmic web. Connection is often invisible until we step back far enough to notice it. The stars seem scattered. Galaxies appear separate, yet beneath that appearance lies a deeper order, patiently revealed only through careful observation. As astronomers continue mapping ever larger regions of the sky, the web grows richer in detail. Its filaments stretch farther, its clusters become more intricate. Its quiet voids reveal subtle textures that earlier generations could never have imagined. And still, nowhere within this magnificent structure do we discover a final wall. No last thread marking the end of existence, only patterns becoming gentler, distances becoming greater, connections continuing beyond the limits of our present view. As you rest beneath this imagined night sky, you might picture the universe not as scattered islands of light, but as an immense web, glistening softly beneath the first light of dawn, every thread quietly connected, every cluster patiently gathered, every wide-open space simply another peaceful part of the same extraordinary whole. And as that image settles gently into your thoughts, another quiet change begins far beyond every filament and every cluster, a slow stretching that continues even now, carrying distant galaxies ever farther apart, and quietly reshaping the future of the cosmos itself. Imagine standing beside a wide, perfectly still lake in the quiet light of evening. The water is smooth enough to reflect every color of the sky. Two small wooden boats rest upon its surface. Neither boat has a sail. Neither has an oar. No one is steering. For a long while, they appear almost motionless. Then, very slowly, you notice something changing. The distance between them grows. At first, it is almost impossible to see. A few moments later, they are slightly farther apart. As more time passes, the widening becomes easier to notice. Not because either boat has chosen a direction. Not because waves are pushing them away from one another. The quiet current beneath them is gently carrying both boats apart. Now imagine that this peaceful scene unfolds not across a lake, but across the universe itself. For billions of years, galaxies have been carried apart as space slowly expands. Earlier in our journey, we discovered that the universe is not expanding into some larger emptiness. Instead, space itself quietly stretches, increasing the distances between many galaxies. For a long time, astronomers believed this stretching might gradually slow down. After all, gravity gently draws matter together. Galaxies attract one another. Clusters gather. The great cosmic web forms through gravity's patient work. It seemed natural to imagine that gravity might eventually slow the expansion of the universe. But nature had another quiet surprise waiting. Toward the end of the 20th century, astronomers carefully studied very distant exploding stars, using them as gentle markers to measure the history of cosmic expansion. The observations revealed something few had expected. The expansion was not slowing. It was gradually becoming faster. The discovery did not arrive with a great flash of certainty. It arrived quietly, through years of careful observation and thoughtful comparison. Again and again, the same picture appeared. The distances between the most distant galaxies were growing more rapidly than expected. Something seemed to be encouraging the expansion to continue. Scientists gave this mysterious influence a simple name. They called it dark energy. The name sounds dramatic, perhaps even a little mysterious, yet in truth, it is less a complete explanation than a careful description. It simply refers to whatever is causing the expansion of the universe to accelerate. In many ways, dark energy is less like a known object and more like a quiet question that still waits for its full answer. Imagine walking through a peaceful orchard at sunset. The trees are evenly spaced. As you continue walking, the paths between them slowly become wider. At first, the change is barely noticeable. Then the distances quietly increase. The orchard itself is gently growing. You do not feel the motion beneath your feet. You simply notice that familiar trees seem farther away than they once were. The universe may be offering us a similar experience. No one feels space stretching. Galaxies themselves do not expand in the same way. Gravity keeps galaxies, stars, planets, and even you securely bound together. The stretching becomes important only across the immense distances between galaxies. On those truly cosmic scales, the quiet widening continues. Patiently, steadily, almost imperceptibly. There is something surprisingly gentle about this picture. Dark energy is not imagined as a great wind sweeping galaxies across the heavens. It does not behave like an explosion. It does not resemble an invisible hand pushing everything outward. Instead, it is more like an ever-present tendency for space itself to continue opening, little by little, age after age. Perhaps the most moving consequence of this slow stretching does not belong to the present. It belongs to the unimaginably distant future. Imagine returning to this same quiet lakeshore, not tomorrow, nor next year, but after a span of time so immense that ordinary calendars lose their meaning. The two boats would now be separated by an enormous distance, still visible perhaps, but much farther apart than before. Wait even longer. The boats become tiny points against the horizon, longer still. Eventually, they fade into the evening mist, not because they disappeared, not because they sank beneath the water, simply because the distance quietly became too great. Astronomers believe something similar may happen to the night sky over unimaginable stretches of cosmic time. Many distant galaxies that are visible today will slowly drift beyond the reach of their light. Future observers, living trillions of years from now, may look into the darkness and find a much lonelier sky. Not because the universe has become smaller, not because galaxies have ceased to exist, but because their ancient light will no longer be able to complete its journey. The great cosmic web we explored only moments ago would still exist. Its graceful filaments would still stretch across the universe. Its clusters would still gather countless galaxies, yet more and more of that magnificent structure would quietly slip beyond every future horizon. There is something both melancholy and peaceful in that thought. The universe does not suddenly close its doors. It simply allows distance to grow until certain conversations can no longer continue. Earlier, we imagined the observable universe as a collection of letters patiently arriving from distant places. Dark energy gently changes that picture. Some letters are still traveling. Some will always arrive. Others, however, may never reach us. Not because they were lost, not because anyone chose to hide them. The roads between sender and receiver simply become longer than light can patiently cross. This does not make the universe less beautiful. If anything, it reminds us how precious the light reaching us tonight truly is. Every distant galaxy visible through a telescope is offering a conversation that will not remain open forever. We live during an extraordinary chapter of cosmic history, one in which the universe still allows us to see much of its vast architecture. Perhaps future civilizations will inherit a quieter sky, a calmer sky, one whose distant companions have gradually faded beyond sight. As you rest beneath this imagined universe, picture countless galaxies floating gently across an ocean of expanding space, each one carrying its own quiet history, each one slowly becoming more distant, not through haste or violence, but through the patient unfolding of the cosmos itself. And as the night grows deeper around those faraway galaxies, another quiet realization begins to emerge. If the universe continues stretching forever, there may come a time when even the horizon itself slowly retreats beyond everything we can ever hope to reach, leaving each observer surrounded by an ever more peaceful island of light within an immeasurably larger sea. Imagine standing on the same quiet hillside where we began our journey many evenings ago. The air is calm. The stars have begun to appear, one by one, across the darkening sky. Far away, tiny villages rest beneath the horizon, each with a handful of warm lanterns glowing softly through the night. At first, you can see many of them. Their lights are scattered across the landscape, like small golden flowers. Some are nearby, others are so distant that they flicker only faintly against the darkness. Now imagine returning to this very hillside, not tomorrow, not next year, but after an unimaginably long passage of time. The night feels just as peaceful. The wind still moves gently through the grass. The stars above remain beautiful, yet something has quietly changed. Many of the distant lanterns are gone, not extinguished, not destroyed, simply too far away for their light to reach you any longer. The villages themselves still exist. Life continues there as it always has. People still gather. Windows still glow. Children still laugh beneath their own night sky. The only thing that has changed is your ability to see them. This quiet image captures one of the most remarkable ideas in modern cosmology. As space continues its slow expansion, encouraged by the gentle influence we call dark energy, more and more distant galaxies will gradually pass beyond a limit from which their light can no longer complete its journey toward us. Earlier, we spoke about the observable universe as a collection of ancient messages still arriving across the darkness. Now we discover that the collection itself is not fixed forever. It changes, very slowly, almost imperceptibly. The universe is not only expanding, the horizon of what can ever communicate with us is quietly changing as well. Imagine floating upon a peaceful sea. Small islands surround you in every direction. At first, they seem comfortably close. The water between them is calm. Over a very long time, however, the sea itself slowly widens. The islands are not sailing away under their own power. The water between them is simply becoming broader. One by one, the most distant islands disappear beyond the soft curve of the horizon. They have not vanished. Your view has simply become smaller than the world itself. The future universe may behave in much the same way. Galaxies that are visible through today's telescopes may slowly drift beyond every future observer's horizon. Eventually, their final rays of light will arrive. The last quiet greeting will be received. After that, no newer messages will ever follow. There is something unexpectedly moving about that thought. Every distant galaxy is carrying on its own long history. Stars continue forming. Others quietly fade. Planets continue circling their suns. Yet there may come a time when those stories can no longer reach us. Not because they have ended, but because the universe itself has gently stretched the pathways between us, beyond what light can patiently cross. This kind of future has a formal name in cosmology. Physicists describe a universe that becomes increasingly dominated by this quiet expansion as de Sitter space. The name itself is not especially important. It is simply a label for a beautiful picture, a universe where the horizon surrounding every observer slowly becomes the boundary of every future conversation. You need not remember the name. Perhaps it is enough to remember the image: an endless ocean, scattered islands, a widening sea. Earlier, we imagined the observable universe as a great library whose shelves extended farther than anyone could explore. Now imagine that library becoming quieter, with unimaginable patience. The books nearest to you remain. Their stories are still waiting, but the most distant shelves slowly disappear into a soft morning mist. Not because the library is shrinking, not because knowledge is being lost, simply because the paths leading there quietly become longer than anyone can ever walk. This future is difficult to imagine because human lives are wonderfully brief compared with cosmic time. Nothing like this will happen during our lifetimes, nor during the lifetimes of countless generations to come. The universe changes with extraordinary patience. Its greatest transformations unfold across spans of time, so immense that mountains rise and disappear like waves upon a shore. Perhaps that is one reason these ideas feel strangely calming. They ask nothing of us. There is nothing to prepare, nothing to prevent. Only another quiet chapter in the long unfolding story of the cosmos. And yet, despite this gradual fading, something beautiful remains. Every observer, no matter how isolated they may one day become, still carries an entire universe around them. Nearby stars continue shining. Galaxies close enough to remain bound together continue their graceful dance. Planets continue turning. Light continues traveling. Beauty does not disappear. It simply becomes more intimate. The immense universe gently gathers into a smaller circle of familiar companions. There is another quiet lesson hidden here. Throughout our journey, we have repeatedly discovered that horizons are not walls. They are not barriers built from stone. They do not mark the place where reality comes to an end. Instead, they quietly describe the limits of conversation, the limits of shared history, the limits of what light has had enough time to connect. The future horizon continues that same gentle lesson. It is not a prison surrounding every observer. It is simply the ever-changing boundary of communication in an expanding universe. The cosmos remains larger than any single viewpoint. It always has. Perhaps it always will. As you rest beneath this imagined sky, picture those distant galaxies glowing softly beyond the farthest reaches of sight, continuing their own quiet histories beneath unfamiliar constellations, while the space between you slowly widens with extraordinary patience, asking for nothing, rushing toward nothing, simply unfolding according to its own timeless rhythm. And as the last faint lanterns disappear into the peaceful distance, another familiar image quietly returns to us. Long ago, we stood beside the ocean and watched the horizon drift farther away with every step. Now we begin to realize that the universe creates horizons of its own, not from water or mist, but from the very geometry of space and time itself, inviting us to understand that some boundaries are not places we can touch, but relationships woven into the fabric of reality. Imagine standing beside a wide, peaceful river in the first light of morning. The water moves gently enough that its motion is almost invisible. Fallen leaves drift quietly across the surface, each following the slow current without resistance. Some leaves remain nearby, others drift farther downstream. The farther they travel, the more difficult they become to see. Eventually, the river bends gently behind distant trees, and the leaves disappear from view. You do not imagine that they have ceased to exist. They have simply continued along a path that your eyes can no longer follow. Now imagine that, somewhere much farther downstream, the river approaches an immense waterfall, hidden behind a curtain of mist. You never see the waterfall itself. You only know that once a leaf passes beyond that hidden bend, it can never drift back upstream to greet you again. The bend is not a wall. It is not a gate. It is simply part of the river's quiet geography. Black holes invite us to imagine something surprisingly similar. Few objects in the universe have captured the human imagination more completely. Their very name sounds mysterious, powerful, almost frightening. Stories often describe them as enormous cosmic vacuum cleaners, endlessly swallowing everything around them. Reality, as it often does, turns out to be both gentler and more fascinating. A black hole is not a hungry mouth floating through space. Most spend their existence quietly, influencing only the region close to them. If our own sun were somehow replaced by a black hole of exactly the same mass, the Earth would continue following almost exactly the same orbit. The light and warmth would disappear, of course, making life impossible. But our planet would not suddenly be pulled inward by some irresistible cosmic force. Gravity at a distance would remain remarkably familiar. The truly remarkable feature of a black hole lies elsewhere. It lies in a special boundary surrounding it. Scientists call this boundary the event horizon. Although the name sounds technical, the idea can remain beautifully simple. Imagine once again that quiet river. There comes a point beyond which every leaf is carried inevitably toward the hidden waterfall. No leaf reaches a stone barrier. No invisible door suddenly closes. The river itself simply allows no path back. The event horizon is something like that. It is not a physical surface floating in space. If you could somehow pass through it, you would not collide with an invisible wall. There would be no great cosmic curtain waiting to stop your journey. Instead, the geometry of space and time itself quietly changes. Every possible future path continues inward. Returning becomes impossible, not because something blocks the way, but because the structure of reality itself gently guides every path in the same direction. Earlier in our journey, we imagined hills quietly shaping the route of a traveler. We imagined rivers naturally guiding drifting leaves. Here, those familiar images return in a deeper form. The landscape of spacetime becomes so profoundly curved that every road leads toward the center, not by force alone, but by geometry. This idea quietly transforms the way we think about horizons. When most people hear the word horizon, they imagine standing beside the sea. The horizon appears to separate the visible world from everything beyond. Yet we know that no wall exists there. The horizon simply reflects the relationship between the observer and the landscape. The event horizon of a black hole teaches a similar lesson. It is not an object. It is not a surface built from matter. It is a relationship created by the shape of space-time itself. And once we begin seeing horizons this way, something remarkable happens. The different ideas we have explored throughout this journey begin to connect. The observable universe has a horizon, not because the universe ends there, but because light has traveled only so far. The future universe has a horizon, not because distant galaxies disappear from existence, but because expanding space gradually prevents their newest light from reaching us. Black holes have horizons, not because they are surrounded by giant shells, but because the geometry of space-time quietly limits which journeys remain possible. Three very different situations. One beautifully similar idea. A horizon is not necessarily the end of something. Very often, it is simply the limit of a relationship, the limit of communication, the limit of shared history, the limit of what one place in the universe can ever know about another. Imagine lighting a candle on a quiet hillside at night. Nearby travelers easily notice its gentle flame. Those much farther away see only a tiny point of light. Eventually, distance becomes so great that no one beyond the farthest hills can see the candle at all. The flame still burns. Its warmth still exists. Only the conversation between the candle and distant observers has quietly come to an end. The universe seems remarkably fond of creating this kind of gentle boundary. Not walls, not fences, relationships. There is something deeply comforting about that realization. Throughout this journey, we have repeatedly searched for the edge of space. Again and again, we have discovered something softer. Instead of walls, we found horizons. Instead of endings, we found limits shaped by light, time, geometry, and patient distance. Even black holes, among the most mysterious objects in the cosmos, quietly repeat the same lesson. Reality is less interested in building barriers than in shaping possibilities. Modern physics continues exploring profound questions about black holes. What ultimately happens to information? How do gravity and quantum physics meet inside these extraordinary objects? Scientists are still searching. The answers have not yet fully revealed themselves, and that uncertainty is perfectly welcome. The universe has never asked us to know everything at once. It simply invites us to notice one quiet truth after another. As you rest beneath this imagined sky, picture every horizon we have encountered gently overlapping like ripples spreading across a calm lake. The horizon upon the sea, the horizon of the observable universe, the quiet boundary surrounding a black hole. Different in detail, beautifully alike in spirit. Each one reminding us that the universe is filled not with walls that forbid exploration, but with gentle boundaries that reveal how light, time, and geometry patiently shape every journey. And with that thought resting softly in your imagination, one final question begins to emerge from the silence. If every horizon we have discovered marks the limit of what we can observe, communicate with, or understand, then what should we make of everything that may lie beyond those horizons, forever hidden not by mystery alone, but by the quiet limits of knowledge itself? Imagine standing on a gentle hillside, just before sunrise. The world around you is quiet. A light mist rests across the valleys below, softening every distant outline. Nearby trees stand clearly in the cool morning air, while hills farther away slowly dissolve into pale silver fog. Beyond those hills may be forests, perhaps rivers, perhaps entire landscapes filled with mountains, lakes, and quiet villages. You cannot see them, not because they do not exist, not because anyone has hidden them from you, simply because the morning mist has not yet lifted. Throughout our journey together, we have discovered that the universe often behaves in much the same gentle way. Again and again, we searched for an edge. Again and again, we found a horizon instead. A horizon shaped by light. A horizon shaped by time. A horizon shaped by the graceful geometry of space itself. Now another quiet question appears. If there are places we cannot observe, what should we believe about them? This is where science becomes especially careful. It does not rush toward certainty. Instead, it quietly separates two ideas that may sound almost identical, yet are wonderfully different. The first is the unknown. The second is the unknowable. The unknown is simply something we have not discovered yet. Imagine finding an old library filled with thousands of beautiful books. Many shelves remain unexplored. Many stories are still waiting to be read. The knowledge exists. We simply have not reached it yet. Science has always been filled with discoveries like these. There was a time when no one knew what caused the changing seasons. A time when galaxies beyond our own had not yet been discovered. A time when humanity had never imagined planets circling distant stars. Each mystery belonged to the unknown. Patient observation slowly transformed them into understanding. The unknowable is gentler. Imagine another library. This one stretches far beyond the horizon. You walk for years, reading every book you can reach. Yet the shelves continue disappearing into the distance, faster than you can ever approach them. The unread books are not hidden. They are simply forever beyond your journey. Some questions about the universe may resemble those distant shelves, not because nature refuses to answer, but because reality itself quietly limits what any observer can ever witness. Earlier, we discovered that light requires time to travel. We learned that cosmic horizons quietly define which conversations are possible. If a region of the universe can never send light that reaches us, then perhaps no observation can ever reveal exactly what is happening there. This is not a failure of science. It is simply one of the universe's gentle rules. Science is remarkably comfortable admitting such limits. There is something deeply peaceful about that honesty. Rather than pretending certainty where none exists, science quietly says, "This is what the evidence allows us to know." Beyond that point, imagination may continue exploring. But imagination and evidence are not quite the same companions. One asks beautiful questions. The other patiently waits for gentle answers. Among those beautiful questions is an idea that has fascinated many physicists. Suppose the extraordinary expansion we discussed earlier did not happen only once. Suppose in some unimaginably vast reality, new regions of space continue beginning their own long histories, each quietly expanding, each perhaps developing its own galaxies, stars, and planets. Some scientists refer to this broad family of ideas as eternal inflation. Within such pictures, our observable universe might be only one quiet region among many. Another related possibility is often called the multiverse. The word naturally captures the imagination. It invites images of countless universes existing beyond our own horizon, some perhaps remarkably similar, others unimaginably different. These ideas are undeniably fascinating, yet modern science approaches them with remarkable care. At present, there is no direct observational evidence confirming that such other universes exist. Some theoretical models naturally suggest them. Some interpretations of modern physics leave room for them. But possibility is not the same as proof. That distinction is one of science's quiet strengths. It allows wonder to flourish without asking certainty to arrive too soon. Perhaps other universes exist. Perhaps they do not. For now, nature has not clearly spoken, and that is perfectly acceptable. Not every beautiful question receives an immediate answer. Some remain open invitations for future generations. Others may forever rest beyond every horizon available to any observer. There is no sadness in that thought, only perspective. Imagine standing beside the ocean once more. You know that lands may exist beyond the distant horizon. You simply cannot see them from where you stand. The unseen does not diminish the beauty of the sea before you. If anything, it deepens your appreciation for both the visible and the invisible. The universe gently offers the same lesson. What we know is extraordinary. What remains unknown is equally inspiring. And what may ultimately remain unknowable reminds us that reality is under no obligation to fit neatly within the boundaries of human curiosity. Perhaps wisdom is not measured by the number of answers we collect. Perhaps it is measured by how peacefully we learn to live beside unanswered questions. Throughout history, every generation has imagined that it stood near the edge of understanding. Again and again, the horizon quietly moved. New discoveries appeared. New mysteries followed. The journey continued. There is every reason to believe that this gentle rhythm will continue long after we are gone. As future minds build quieter instruments and ask kinder questions, the universe may reveal stories that today remain hidden. Others may remain forever beyond reach. Both possibilities belong naturally to the same beautiful cosmos. As you rest beneath this imagined night sky, surrounded by familiar stars and distant galaxies whose ancient light has traveled so patiently to meet you, perhaps you no longer feel the need to reach every horizon. Perhaps it is enough simply to know that they exist, inviting curiosity without demanding certainty. And with that quiet acceptance, only one gentle question remains. After wandering through expanding space, ancient light, hidden geometry, patient horizons, and the deepest limits of observation, what answer might we finally give to the simple question that began our journey together? Where does space stop? We have wandered together for a long while, across silent galaxies, through ancient light, along invisible rivers of space and time. Now, almost without noticing how far we have come, we find ourselves standing once again beside the quiet shoreline where our journey first began. The sea is calm. The horizon rests peacefully beneath the stars. Nothing about it seems hurried. Nothing asks to be solved tonight. It simply waits, just as it always has. When we first arrived here, the horizon seemed almost like a destination. It appeared to be a place, a distant line where the world might quietly come to an end. Yet every gentle step we have taken together has slowly transformed that picture. We now know that the horizon has never been a wall. It has always been a relationship, a meeting between distance, light, and the place where you happen to be standing. Perhaps the universe has been teaching us exactly the same lesson. We began with a simple question. Where does space stop? It seemed such a natural thing to ask. After all, every room has walls, every garden has a fence, every island has a shoreline. Our daily lives gently encourage us to believe that every place must eventually arrive at an ending. but the universe has quietly invited us toward another way of seeing. We discovered that the observable universe is not the entire universe. It is simply the region whose ancient light has had enough time to reach us. Like letters patiently crossing an immeasurable distance, every beam of light carries only the stories that have already completed their long journey. Beyond that gentle horizon, there may be countless other stories still traveling, not absent, simply unfinished. We followed those patient travelers until they led us toward invisible horizons, woven from time itself. We learned that light does not move instantly. Every conversation across the cosmos unfolds with extraordinary patience. The greatest boundaries we encountered were never made of stone. They were created by the quiet rhythm with which information travels through space. Then we discovered something even more surprising. Space itself is not standing still. The great stage upon which galaxies appear to dance is quietly stretching. The galaxies are not simply sailing across a motionless ocean. The ocean itself is gently becoming wider. There is no need for the universe to expand into another larger room. The room itself slowly grows. From there, our journey became softer still. We learned that the universe may possess a shape without possessing an edge. A curved landscape does not require a final cliff. A traveler walking across the earth never arrives at the place where the ground suddenly disappears. Completion does not always require a boundary. We wandered through possibilities where space might quietly wrap around itself, allowing unimaginably long journeys to return home without ever touching a wall. We listened to the oldest light still filling the heavens, that ancient whisper patiently carrying memories from the universe's earliest days. Within its quiet glow, we found gentle clues about the great cosmic landscape, clues suggesting remarkable balance, extraordinary smoothness, and a universe that appears astonishingly close to flat across the immense region we are able to observe. We watched tiny ripples become galaxies. We watched galaxies become graceful rivers stretching across the darkness. We discovered that the largest empty spaces are not the edges of existence. They are simply quieter places within the same magnificent tapestry. Then, our attention slowly turned toward the future. Space continues stretching. The distances between galaxies continue growing. Some distant conversations will one day become impossible, not because the galaxies disappear, not because the universe ends, only because light can no longer complete the journey. Even black holes quietly repeated the same lesson. Their horizons were not walls. They were gentle limits written into the geometry of spacetime itself. Again and again, the universe offered us the same quiet truth in different forms. The edge we searched for was never made of matter. It was made of perspective. Finally, we stood beside the greatest mystery of all. Beyond every horizon lies the possibility of more. Perhaps other regions forever beyond our view. Perhaps even realities we can never observe. Science welcomes such questions with remarkable humility. It distinguishes carefully between what remains unknown today and what may remain forever beyond observation. There is something deeply peaceful about that honesty. The universe has never promised that every mystery will be solved. It has simply invited us to keep listening, to keep wondering, to remain patient. And perhaps that is the quiet answer we have been approaching all along. Modern cosmology offers no evidence that the universe possesses a physical edge, no great wall waiting beyond the last galaxy, no final cliff where space suddenly ends. Instead, the limits we encounter are almost always horizons, gentle boundaries created by light, by time, by geometry, by the patient expansion of the cosmos. The universe may be finite. It may be infinite. It may possess a hidden shape far grander than anything we can currently imagine. For now, nature has not revealed the complete picture. Yet one thing seems beautifully consistent. Where we once expected a wall, we discovered a horizon. Where we imagined an ending, we found another question. Where we searched for certainty, we found wonder. Perhaps the edge of space is not a destination waiting somewhere beyond the stars. Perhaps it has always been something quieter. The edge of what light has had time to tell us. The edge of every conversation the universe has been able to share. And beyond that, the story continues. Whether anyone will ever hear the next chapter remains one of the universe's gentlest mysteries. As the stars slowly wheel across the imagined sky above you, there is nothing more you need to solve tonight. You are safe. The universe has been unfolding for billions of years before this quiet evening, and it will continue unfolding long after this moment has gently passed. There is nothing to chase, nothing to reach, nothing to prove, only the quiet comfort of knowing that curiosity itself can be peaceful, that not every horizon asks to be crossed. Some exist simply to remind us how wonderfully vast reality truly is. And so, our journey drifts quietly to its end. Whether you are still listening beneath the gentle glow of your screen, or already floating somewhere between dreams and distant galaxies, thank you for traveling here tonight, through ancient light, silent horizons, and the quiet geometry that shapes the universe. If this peaceful wandering brought you a little calm, you are warmly welcome to subscribe or share this journey with someone who could use a gentler night beneath the stars. For now, rest well. The galaxies will continue their patient dance. Space will continue its quiet unfolding. The oldest light will continue its endless journey across the cosmos, and the universe will carry on softly around you while you sleep.